It appears we have a quorum, and I think I can see most of our witnesses. Mr. Falinski, you have the call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure who to direct this question to, but I noticed on the 17th of November, the Australian Financial Review ran an article titled "Grow Your Own Super, Steak Boss Urges Millennials," written by, embarrassingly with the last name Falinski, I'm going to mispronounce this, but Alec Vervekic, I think, who's the wealth editor at the AFR. In the article, it says, however, the launch is likely to be contentious given many steak customers fall below the recommended SMSF starting balance of $500,000 espoused by the Australian Securities and Investment Commission. It costs on average $13,900 a year to run an SMSF, according to ASIC, well above the average administration and investment fees paid to a regular professional manager super fund. Is that still the view of ASIC?
Mr. Falinski, it's Danielle Press, Commissioner of ASIC. That data has been updated on MoneySmart and has been very clearly noted on the red flag report that it is dated data. So no, it is not the view of ASIC, and that data is actually ATO data.
Do you think it would be worth correcting the media when misinformation of that nature is put out there to consumers, given that the data originally came from ASIC?
Mr. Falinski, I do apologise. I actually did not see that article, to be perfectly honest. There was much going on in our lives in that week. I'd be very happy to take it away and I'll notice and have a look at it and make sure that it is that the journalist is aware of the position of fact.
ASIC holds. Fantastic.
And Mr. Falinski, I might suggest, given this is obviously a matter of sensitivity with some of the senators and members, that we'll make sure we do a special check in our media downloads on that matter to make sure if there is any further misreporting, we identify it and the team Corporate Affairs can automatically let the journalists know and have it corrected.
I appreciate that. I don't know whether to refer to you as Chair Chester. That seems a bit alliterative. I'll just call you Ms. Chester if that's all right with you, Karen. Thank you. While we're talking about the media, ASIC issued a media release on the 5th of November titled 2270MR, former financial advisor convicted and fined $30,000 for dishonest conduct, and refers to a Mark Damien Kowalski as being a financial advisor. I think it would be fair to say that referencing that Mr. Kowalski was a financial advisor sends a message to consumers that they need to be cautious of people calling themselves financial advisors. My problem with this is Mr. Kowalski, and I could be wrong on this, but I've had a look, doesn't appear anywhere on ASIC's AFSL register. He doesn't appear to have ever been registered as a financial advisor or planner, and he certainly doesn't appear on any register going back to 2015, 2016, when the contraventions took place. Do you think it's worth making it clear that when someone is fined in this nature, that they're not a financial advisor, so that we can instill in consumers confidence that when someone sees a financial planner or a financial advisor, that they are registered and are subjected to some form of professional conduct and training?
Mr. Falinski, Danielle Press. I think that the short answer to that question would be yes. I would like to take on notice the circumstances of that media release. To be honest, I don't have it to hand, as we do many of these,
yes,
and to ensure that that is correct. But and certainly on our MoneySmart website, we are very clear to say that if you are looking for a financial planner, that you should check the financial advisors register. to ensure that they are, in fact, a financial advisor.
So when I raised this issue with a couple of people, one of them said to me that ASIC had actually referred to Mr. Kawaki as a financial advisor in no less than 3 media releases in August 2019 and June 2018. If we're going to go, if the Parliament, if ASIC, if FASIA are going to go, or FASIA, however it's appropriately pronounced, are going to go through the process of putting tens of thousands of people through onerous amounts of retraining and re-education to get to the point where they can call themselves financial planners and advisors, does it make sense for regulators to call people who never were financial advisors financial advisors?
Mr. Falinski, I will need to take that on notice and have a look at the exact case, and I'll come back to you to see why we had chosen to call him a financial advisor.
Thank you. I understand that, Danielle, but my broader question is a principle-based one. If we are going to make people go through a whole period of training and education before they're allowed to call themselves financial advisors, and indeed in many cases make people go through retraining who've been financial advisors for decades without anyone complaining about them, does it make any sense for us to not appropriately label people who are financial advisors? I mean, you would get to the point of saying, does it make any sense for us to call anyone a lawyer?
So, Mr. Falinski, I think you're raising a broader but very important issue, and that is what are the controls and checks in place when ASIC puts out media releases, especially when they name individuals? A lot of careful fact-checking occurs within ASIC before a media release goes out. So in addition to Ms. Presser saying that we'll take the individual circumstances here on notice as to the individual that you've raised, I think that it would be good if we also came back to you with an articulation of what those processes are for checking the accuracy of the names and the professional descriptions of the individuals that are subject to administrative action by ASIC.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Chester. I appreciate that. Going back, and this is slightly tangential, I accept, but recently, as you would be aware, FASIA has decided that it is going to, and this came out under questioning from Senator Stokes in a Senate committee, that it is going to apply a very strict ruling that there can be no conflicts of interest under its standard 3. When Senator Stoker put on notice that she would like to know who had made submissions for this very strict ruling, there appear to have only been 2 submissions in favour of applying an absolute no conflicts standard to standard 3. One was by Choice, which received substantial amounts of money from the taxpayer, and the other was from 2 Griffith University academics, where it was noted by them that their submission was developed with input from members of ASIC's Consumer Advisory Panel. Can you tell us who's on that advisory panel?
Mr. Falinski, I'm happy to take on notice who is on the advisory panel. It is quite a large panel, and I would be bound to miss somebody. Would you like me to tell you at the time when that report was made, or now?
Well, it was only made, so that submission was only made in December 2018, so not that long ago. Yeah.
It has changed since then, so I'm assuming you're looking at the time of December 18.
Okay. And what changes have there been made in terms of the selection of the people on that panel?
I don't think the selection process has changed, but the people on the panel have, as naturally occurs, rolled through as their terms have expired.
Fantastic. Could you also let us know the selection process?
Certainly.
Thank you. Can you also let me know, or do you know, did ASIC fund any specific submission from Griffith University?
ASIC didn't fund a specific Griffith University submission. The CAP panel, which does get funding from ASIC, had funded that submission. ASIC was not involved in either the preparation nor the review of that submission prior to it going to FASEA.
So ASIC's Consumer Advisory Panel receives its budget from where? Sorry, Danielle?
It does fund the CAP panel over the course. So ASIC does fund the Consumer Advisory Panel, and out of that funding of that particular year, it did provide or did engage with Griffith University to provide a submission to FASEA.
Okay. So what level of funding does ASIC usually provide to the Consumer Advisory Panel?
It does vary from year to year. It's usually, the submissions usually are within sort of $10,000 to $15,000 in their costing, and it will depend a little on what is actually happening in the year. But I can give you a number of things. So in fiscal year 19-20, there's been no funded submissions. In fiscal year 18-19, there was a joint submission to the review of the e-payments code. In fiscal 17-18, there was a submission to FASEA. In 16-17, there was a submission to the Ramsay review.
So when you say you funded submissions, that's not the total amount of funding that the panel receives, though, is it?
I would need to take that on notice,
please.
Mr.
Thank you, Danielle.
On what other things we actually provide, but generally it's through administrative support as opposed to direct funding.
Okay. And are people paid for being on the panel or being members of the panel?
No, they are not. As in, none of our consultative panels are paid, and we do have a number of industry panels as well as a consumer panel.
But do they receive any money for costs associated with serving on the panel?
Not to the best of my knowledge, no.
Such as travel or per diems?
No.
Okay. So I guess my question here is, do you think sorry, Daniel? No, sorry. Do you think it's fair enough for ASIC to be basically funding submissions to other government bodies?
Sorry, Danielle, go ahead.
Mr. Falinski, I think this particular issue was not necessarily to the body. It was to ensure that there was a consumer voice being put forward, which we do think in most policy debates is important. And we felt.
But Danielle, can't you see? I mean, quite legitimately, can't you see from financial planners or advisors' point of view that they have a government body in FASEA where they receive over 600 submissions, only one from choice. As I understand it, the overwhelming majority are in favour of the more reasonable standard, not the strict standard. And then you've got ASIC's Consumer Advisory Panel, funded by ASIC, which is funded by industry levies, putting a submission that is, well, arguing for a stricter code. I mean, it didn't seem to be. Why would financial advisors feel that ASIC is reasonable or balanced when they're dealing with them on other issues?
Well, Mr. Falinski, as I said before, ASIC was not involved in the actual preparation of that report or the review of it before it went to FASEA.
But you funded it.
Through the Consumer Advisory Panel, yes.
Which you appoint?
Yes, as we appoint other industry bodies, and we had.
Did any of the other industry bodies make submissions to FASEA on this issue?
Other industry bodies, I'm sure they did, but that would be a question.
No, industry bodies appointed by you. Did you fund any other submissions to FASEA on this issue?
So, Mr. Falinski, we might take that on notice because I know there had historically been a governance panel, and I recall from the time I actually did the capability review, not currently, that there was some funding for some governance research to be done. So, can we take that on notice so we can give you a more fulsome answer? I think more importantly is the question on what basis did ASIC make the decision to provide that money for that purpose? I think that would go to address the issues that you're raising. And just to reinforce the point that Commissioner Press made before, we are very fortunate with all of our panels, both our external advisory panel, the governance-related panel that we have, and the consumer advisory panel, that these are with very different lenses on the work that we do as a regulator, but they inform us and help us do our jobs well. We get a lot of information and data from the consumer advisory panel, as we do from the governance panel and others, that help inform our metrics and our data for helping us understand consumer harms, market integrity issues and the like. So we're happy to give you a bit more of an expansive perhaps response on this one so you can get a better handle on the benefits that we get. Just on the issue of whether or not it was industry funded, I might be incorrect here, but my recall is under the industry funding model, part of the funding that goes to CAP is not picked up in the industry funding model, but we'll also cover that off in the response to your issue.
Can I also add, Mr. Falinski, just to ensure we don't mislead you, that we don't pay per diems, but occasionally we have paid travel costs, some small contribution towards travel costs, and it may be, and I'll have to check this and take it on notice, but it may be that we also pay a small fee to the independent chair of the Consumer Advisory Panel just to assist with the time it takes to work through the agenda and preparing and chairing the meeting. But that amount is a very small amount, but we'll take that on notice and bring that back to you. Can
I thank you, Mr. Day, Danielle, and Ms. Chester for your information on that. I look forward to finding out more. One last thing before I hand it back to the chair. You being ASIC have rightfully made a lot of the term independent. Indeed, you have made the point over and over again, which I think most reasonable Australians would consider to be right, that if a financial planner or advisor is working for a financial institution, whether it be AMP, Westpac, the Commonwealth Bank, whoever it may be, that they can't call themselves independent. And I'm just wondering that this particular group called Frontier, that are putting themselves out there as financial advisors and are calling themselves Australia's leading independent financial advisors, advising Australian investors as a trusted advisor for over 20 years. Have you spoken to them about their use of independent?
Mr. Falinski, I don't believe that Frontier provide retail financial advice. I think they are a wholesale advice business. I would need to take on notice exactly their wording to get back to you on that.
You're on mute, Jason.
As there are so many ways to mute yourself around here, but as Ms. Hammond pointed out earlier, I've worked out how to undo all of them, unfortunately. Danielle, what confuses me about that answer though is that what you're saying is that it's okay to call yourself independent as long as you're not giving advice to a retail investor.
No, I think my answer was really around the use of the term independent that you had referred to with respect to BT, AMP, Commonwealth Bank. Okay,
so there might be a problem with using the word independent.
I would need to have a look at the way they are actually structuring it, what they're saying.
Let me just, for the record, mention some of the people on the board. Deborah Cole, she's an appointed representative of Hester. John Edwards is an appointed representative of CBUS and is a director of the CBUS board. This is from their website, Danielle. Angela Emsley is an independent director. John Dixon is an appointed representative of Australian Super. Scott McDine is a representative of First State Super, which is now Aware Super. Is that sounding like an independent group of directors?
My understanding, Ms. Falinski, is that they represent the ownership of Frontier.
Right.
The question of independent depends on what advice, in inverted commas, they are talking about, and I would need to take on notice actually exactly where they're using that word and whether or not it falls foul of the independent requirements.
Well, it's actually, Danielle, if it assists, if you go to their website, it's like the first things that you will see, as I struggle to find where I put it, is that they are Australia's leading independent asset consultants.
So
It's not like they're hiding the word independent.
sorry, Mr. Falinski, but an asset consultant is quite different from a financial advisor.
Oh, okay. So if financial advisors call themselves independent asset consultants, that's okay?
It depends on to whom they're providing advice, Mr. Falinski.
So now we're back to, as long as they're not providing advice to retail investors, then it's okay.
No, that is actually not what I said, Mr. Falinski. But
Sorry.
at the end of the day, an asset consultant is a certain role in the financial services industry, which is quite different from a financial advisor.
Right.
The independent requirements, as far as I'm aware in law, are obtained on the financial advice space, not on an asset consultant space.
Right. So you would see it as a defence if a financial planner said, no, I was just giving asset consultation.
Not if they were giving financial advice, no.
Okay. So what's the difference? Okay. I'm going to put a question on notice asking you to specify for me on ASIC's behalf what the difference between asset consultation is and financial advice.
I would be very happy to take that question on notice, Mr. Falinski, because it is quite a different set of circumstances to which it's provided.
Oh, well, please tell me if you can inform me now, that would be great. Or the committee, not me.
Well, given the time, I think
Okay, that's fine. I'll put it on
might have
notice.
that on
Thank you.
notice. That'd be helpful.